Hello. I hate when the MCs almost make me cry. Let's see. While I wait to see, oh, there are my slides. Can I get them on the confidence monitor? I want to feel confident for this talk. Almost there. There we go. Great. Let's see if we can get, whoop, wrong. Ooh, so thank you for having me, JS Comms. This is my first time in Carlsbad. No one will tell me what Carl did. I've been really nervous all week. So if you know, I'd like to find out. And yeah, so thank you for JSCon for having me. Thank you to all our problematic sponsors for making this event happen. I am going to do as I usually do, which is tell a story. When I was a kid, I was very good at school, except for history class. It was my least favorite class. And still am very bad at memorizing things that I don't see the point of remembering, like years famous men in powder wigs are born. And as a response to my frustrations about the subject, my father would always tell me, "Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it." Imagine that in a very thick Brooklyn accent. And I resented it because it didn't make the class any easier and my grades didn't improve. But since then I've come to realize that he, or the Spanish philosopher George Santayana, who actually came up with that quote, I realized that maybe he was onto something. There are many things that have happened in history that are happening again. A lot of bad things, but also good things. And we're doing a pretty bad job at recognizing that and adapting accordingly, even in our humble JavaScript community. Have you considered that many of our so-called innovations in JavaScript actually have prior art? We didn't invent functional programming or command line interfaces, for JavaScript frameworks. That's like the new hot thing now. We didn't invent codes of conduct at events. Every mall in Jersey, in New York at least, has codes of conduct. This is the Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn. And we also didn't invent baking bread, which is a huge trend through here. This is a really great photo in 1917 of a couple of Backbone.js developers taking a break to check on their bread. These particular things have not been actively harming society, but I think it's slowing the industry down. It's been like a solid 5 years and a few months since I entered this industry from academia, and most of the public discourse about the language is still just shit posting, which doesn't seem very innovative or inventive to me. And I fancy myself an innovator and an inventor. I invented the bike plow. And it was at this event in 2014 when I innovated efficient search with the Jort sort algorithm. 4 years later, and Jort sort's been implemented in 47 different languages, which means I'm not the crazy one. It was in RxJS, but then they moved repos, and I think an envious soul removed it. So maybe one of you can make a pull request and put it back in. But over the past year or so, my focus has shifted from gene shorts and efficient sorts to ethics and technology, especially its relationship with art history. Get you a woman who can do both. Through my explorations of the parallels between ethical quandaries in the art world's past and present and the tech industry's present and future, I've learned a lot more than I anticipated about how my decisions as a software engineer and citizen impact the people and the communities that I'm a part of. I think software engineers have a huge tendency to forget that we are also citizens. And it turns out that we may have already been doomed to repeat history, and our industry is actively ignoring that or trying to rewrite it. And it's driven me to take a more historical approach in my education around web development, So instead of like just learning a cutting edge API or a long existing one that I finally now have to use for a project, I've been researching those technologies, and I found that it's become a requirement for me to getting a true sense of what their purpose is, so I know exactly how to use it. A lot of people that are introduced to new frameworks or APIs, they use it, but they're not aware of what the best practices are because they don't know the history of how that framework came to be, and through that history, you kind of infer those best practices. But I wasn't invited here to talk about how our ignoring history has led us to normalize the existence of Nazis in person and online, or how several of the tech companies represented here are complicit by, actively allowing hateful organizations like Breitbart to sell ugly t-shirts to a large subset of our nation that believes that a few of the people in this room don't deserve basic human rights like actually existing, or by helping ICE to organize their emails in Outlook. I'm here to talk about the tiniest unit of programmable color on a computer-generated image. Enhance, thank you. The pixel. And being that this is JSConf, which stands for JavaScript Conf, I keep being reminded, I should define that pixel in JavaScript. X-coordinate, Y-coordinate, and a color. But this is the AMP track, and so I'm legally obligated to provide high-performance JavaScript-free examples. So because of the fact that anything displayed digitally is made up of pixels, and that none of us in here, not even me, can truly define what is art, I want us to move onward together on this 8-hour filibuster so that Horse.js is not exposed, with the assumption that literally everything is pixel art and slide transitions. My name is Jenn Schiffer. When I'm not shining the spotlight on my ADHD with my bizarre tech intros, I make both pixel art and digital art tooling specifically around pixel art. That's me. So pixel art, or its popularly searched nickname, and sometimes misnomer 8-bit art, is a style of art that embraces retro graphics, especially from video games going as far back as the 60s. It's a style that works both on the screen and off. My pixel art tends to be more analog, written on paper. And pixel art is abstract. You don't need to be great or good even at drawing photorealistic art. And because it turns out you only need a little bit of data, in this case under 1,000 pixels and I think like 6 colors, but a little bit of data goes a long way towards conveying something as complex as human emotion. And that's why I make art, to express feelings. And pixel art is abstract enough that it provides me a means to define what perfection is when it comes to expressing those feelings. And pixel art lowers the barrier to artistic expression while invoking nostalgia in a fun and positive way, which is why I love it. And it's what drives me to work on make8bitart.com, which is a free in-browser pixel art editor that thousands of people use every day to express themselves in an abstract and nostalgic way. I'm also the director of community engineering at Glitch. Director sounds really fancy. I feel like the Greta Gerwig of JavaScript. And this is where I build and run most of my work today and try to empower other creative people to love and use the web to express themselves with code. Glitch is the friendliest community of coders building the apps of their dreams and helping others to do the same. Glitch is similar to pixel art and make 8-bit art in that I feel like it lowers the barrier to expression while invoking nostalgia in a fun and positive way. And in the case of Glitch, the medium is code and the tools are the community and the collaborative editor in the browser. I can see some Glitch users in the audience already, so shouts out. And if you haven't tried it out yourself, I say give it a shot. We're trying to build something that leaves people feeling joy, which is something that I feel we've seemed to have lost since the days of GeoCities, early Neopets, and the hit Warner Brothers film Space Jam. So I've been studying art and tech in tandem, and through that I've become a better artist, engineer, and also a better citizen. I always say that to be a good programmer, you need to be using code to do social good and not harm, which lately seems to be easier said than done. I think that a lot of engineers have forgotten that, or worse, actively ignored that. But again, I'm not here to talk about how there are tech companies, maybe some even represented here, who are paid a lot of money to develop unchecked black box algorithms used to sentence people to prison or tear families apart through our unethical deportation processes. I'm here to talk about pixel art and JavaScript. Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, pixel art, JavaScript, yes. Because that's what the schedule says, which, by the way, my page on the JSConf website, Derek had added an Easter egg and all the text is in lowercase, because that's how I typically write. I've always been very interested in pixel art as someone who creates it, and as I entered the tech industry as a proponent of the open web and the democratization of the technologies around it, I gained a passion for creating tools to facilitate the creation of pixel art. Particularly with the JavaScript language. So it makes sense that I ended up working at Glitch so I can facilitate the creation of JavaScript in an artistic way. Just like me, pixel art has a background in academia. I was a professor and administrator in academia and then left for the tech industry 5 years ago. The first time the term pixel art was published was in the December 1982 issue of the ACM Communications journal, which ACM is the Association of Computing Machinery. Are there any members in here? It's a long-running professional organization working to advance computing as a profession. They also author the ACM Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, which is a must-read. I wouldn't call the 1982 issue a must-read. Pixel art was only mentioned to describe how they morphed the previous white guy president of ACM into the next white guy president of ACM. I looked it up on Amazon. This is the least popular book in the Animorph series. I think that's why ACM pivoted to ethics and professional conduct. Like how before the painting came the paint, before the pixel art, there was the pixel. And some would say the pixel was created with the invention of photography in 1839, or the first CRT television right here in 1927, or color television in the 1950s, but they're wrong. Those aren't actually pixels. I would argue that it was the Impressionist movement in the mid-1880s where we see the first pixels. Pointillism, a technique popularized by Georges Seurat, is perhaps one of the earliest forms of analog pixel art, if you can forgive the irregular grid. Each dot does have a color and X and Y coordinates on some sort of canvas. Oh yeah, there's the AMP version. By the way, it would be out of character for me to not plug my old publication, vart.institute, where I wrote code and prose inspired by fine artists. So if you want to learn more about Seurat and see a pixel art spin on some of his work, you should check it out. So although people are not sure exactly when the word was first spoken, pixel first appeared in print in 1965 by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL. Surprisingly, there was a time where we weren't just building tech to destroy democracy and human rights. Back then, the JPL was trying to enhance images from outer space and conduct research on computer imaging so we can have the nice displays that we have today. And in the 60s, dozens of computer scientists working out of iconic research institutions like the JPL, Xerox PARC, Bell Labs were innovating displays and the creation of imagery for those displays. And they were hiring artists to come and create art with their software. Imagine that, allowing artists into the office. David M. was one of those digital artists. He was not particularly interested in innovating as a digital painter. He came from traditional paint, but it was par for the course when hardware and software for making art were so young and also broken all the time. In an intro to his book on art, cleverly titled The Art of David M., he expressed exactly how I feel about my MacBook Pro with the touch bar. He said, I quickly learned that making pictures with state-of-the-art computers required a lot more than simply learning to use the tools. Computer programs are delicate and fragile, as are many of the personalities who created them. Everything was in a state of development, and the machines tended to break down. Speaking of display woes, back then the only way to capture digital displays was to literally photograph the screen. I can relate, as I recently moved from using a MacBook to this Windows machine, and I still have no fucking idea how to take a screenshot on it. David M. was also one of the several artists who were able to use Super Paint, which is an 8-bit digital color painting system created out of Xerox PARC by Richard Shoup and his colleagues, one of whom was the co-creator of Pixar, Alvy Ray Smith. If you go to his website, it's currently updated and I think rivals Space Jam's. And this is the rack that the hardware sat on. Super Paint was an innovative image editing application that became the foundation of future editing software that we even use today. This artwork, Black Girls, by this artist Fritz Fischer, who took a job as a night guard at Xerox PARC so that he can, in his off time, use the system to draw. This is one of the earliest and most impressive digital paintings made on the system. And in 1983, Super Paint won Xerox an Emmy, so take that, like whatever actor ever won an Emmy. I don't know. But perhaps what charmed me most about Super Paint when I learned about it was how its tools were drawn using Super Paint itself. This was a major validation for me doing the same for make8bitart.com. This is actually Super Paint 78 running on my MacBook. You can get the executable file, and I used wine bottles so I could run it on the Mac. And it worked. Look at my beautiful drawing. So back in 2011, I was interested in learning JavaScript and leaving academia, and so I built make8bitart.com as a way to learn JavaScript and build something I would use. Again, I don't know how to take screenshots on this thing. Unlike Super Paint, which sat on like 2 5-foot equipment racks, my system sat on like a folder on a shared hosting site, which might have been on 5-foot equipment racks, I don't know. At initial launch, it was a large div container that held many smaller div squares, where on click, it would have its background color change to one of the several options of the color I gave the user. And to save your art, I told you to take a screenshot. Which made me a horrible human. What I should have done was tell you to photograph it. To make the user experience easier, though, I learned about the Canvas API, realized I needed to know a little bit more about JavaScript than just jQuery's click and CSS functions. In this code, and make8bitart doesn't use AMP, so I'm not going to do that here. You have a canvas, you grab the context. Depending on the X and Y of where the mouse clicks, you just draw a square on a grid using ClearRect or FillRect. I was a PHP developer at the time, so the save functionality that made sense to me was obviously to make an AJAX call to a PHP script that created the file on a shared hosting server of the image and return that image's location to the user for them to save. And of course, I forgot to write the script that made those files only temporary, which I realized when I got an email from my shared hosting company reporting that like not only was I out of disk space, but like the entire like rack was like filled with about 1,200 Marios. And I realized this all could be remedied and done client-side, and so I rewrote the whole thing, and I even made the canvas of the page, the full width of the window, added new color palette, features, copy-paste, and I realized that the obsolescence of my constraints as a programmer now writing client-side JavaScript, I was through that able to remove the constraints of the artists using my tools, including myself. And if you're interested in learning about how I build the app with non-developers in mind, you should watch my notorious Underplanes.js talk, Your Grandpa Probably Doesn't Have Node. People just call it my open source as a prison talk. As I mentioned earlier, thousands of people use make8bitart.com to draw, probably mostly Marios. Other than the fact that the site loads fast as hell using jQuery and web fonts, thanks to a lot of contributors, there was nothing particularly innovative about what's going on the site. And remember, I am an innovator and an inventor, so naturally I was driven to explore and experiment. And I got the chance to do that in 2015. Do you hear my fidget spinner? Okay. So in 2015, I was offered an unpaid artist residency at the Made in NY Media Center, Live in the Life. They wanted cool technologists to show the entertainment industry that innovative things related to media and image can and do happen in New York City. Stop moving to Hollywood. Where are you going? And I wanted to explore how to conceptualize my pixel art as more of a process and path from blank canvas to something that invokes some sort of emotion without needing to record video or take constant photographs of my screen. And I wanted to map that importance of process to the work of the everyday developer, as it seems to be what artists need to do to legitimize their work in the tech industry still these days, at least until JPL starts hiring more artists. Who here is familiar with the joy of painting? Yeah. For those of you not, it features the artist Bob Ross, who paints mostly landscapes in an instructional format. It aired during the 80s and 90s. And I don't know about y'all who have watched it, but I never watched it solely to see the end product. I wanted to see Ross's process, see how he painted those fresh mountains and happy trees. After all, the show is called The Joy of Painting, not The Joy of a Painting. And the importance of documenting process is not only important in art. I mean, who among us in this room has not cried for joy or terror or sadness over version control? Keeping a history of our application's code is one of the first things we set up before we even print out Hello World these days. And being able to see a history of what code is not only useful for reverting to before breaking commits, but it's crucial for auditing, onboarding, or simply reading the history and understanding why the features that exist and why they were written the way that they were. Those who do not study history of a code base are doomed to repeat the same mistakes its developers made in past sprints. I said that, not George Santayana. To me, the joy of coding is seeing how the developer got there, like being able to view source and history. So it's not a surprise to anyone who knows my work or knows Glitch that we're a big proponent of being able to view the source of apps, and it's why we brought that functionality to server-side files. And also we have our Git rewind interface, so you can visually slide through the Git history of your app. Studying history, if we have to do it or else be doomed, we shouldn't feel doomed and cry while we're studying it like I did in my AP Government and Politics class. I did not pass the AP exam, by the way. So there's been a lot of really weird, interesting debate over whether to keep view source or get rid of it, as if that's even a real idea. It's already kind of hidden from view. And I say it's important for new developers to be able to learn to build the web like we did by seeing working code and not learning alone. Others say that if you fight for view source, then that means that you hate performing code and you don't care about the people who have bad internet access, which isn't true, and I think it's a completely unfair argument. My stance on it is that it's 2018. We have a robot on Mars that apparently sings happy birthday to itself. We have a fucking Tesla orbiting in space. And you can get like a 20% discount at Helen's Pizza in Jersey City if you pay with Bitcoin. So technology is like advanced as fuck, and it's still evolving. So instead of both sides dismissing the other's movement, we should instead figure out a way to provide a performant information superhighway surfing experience without obfuscating our code to the point that there's no transparency as to what our apps are even doing. And this can mean that we innovate how we bundle our code or how we host it or how browsers render it, or even what languages we build the web in, which we know is changing with WebAssembly. I think this is going to be really important with the current trend of developers building trackers and using people's CPUs to mine cryptocurrency. And consumers are becoming more hip to the shitty things that are being done to them through the web. And I think that if we want the open web to win, which we do, we need to throw out those straw man arguments and just accept the fact that we have a lot of collaborative work to do to promote education, accessibility, and performance, not either or. And I think all of us in this room and beyond actually do want that. But I'm not here to talk about Helen's Pizza, located at 183 Newark Avenue in Jersey City, which, if you go to my meetup, Jersey Script, on the last Tuesday of every month, you can go down the street and have a slice. It's really good. I'm here to talk about everyone's favorite, no. No, I'm here to talk about process. So in 2005, I found this Flash-based drawing app called Otis Sketch, created by Adobe by a design agency called Otopod. You may know them as the premier digital partner of Hennessy since 2012. Otis Sketch was really adorable. It provided you a small newsprint-like canvas to create pastel-like drawings, and the aesthetic was really cute. But my favorite part was that it let you replay the drawing of your or anyone else's art. So in essence, it was intentionally and beautifully exposing the process of the art created. Sadly, it was a prime example of what I've been mentioning in previous talks of mine, non-consensual ephemerality, as the app and its associated gallery no longer exist, RIP Flash. This is what happens when you allow your process and final creation to be locked behind proprietary services and protocols, which, by the way, Glitch does not lock you into proprietary languages or protocols. You can export your apps and run them anywhere there is Node. And JSConf exclusive, soon we're going to be hiring. I figured an Otis Sketch-like feature that replays the process of drawing pixel art would be really rad for people who draw and make 8bitart.com. And it wouldn't be too hard, as I was already saving info about each stroke in Paint for the redo functionality. So basically, whenever you drew something, I would save what the X and Y coordinate and the color was and add that to an array. And so you had an array of the entire history. But the site is make 8-bit art and not make 8-bit art and replay it. And it would be out of character for me to build a monolith suite of drawing and replaying tools instead of having a separate app that replayed the process info from my drawing app. And I decided that if I do that, I can then standardize that process info in a way that it can be used in any app that wanted in on the action, whether or not I actually built it. I want to democratize the pixel and the process. This exploration of process and its place in the open web ecosystem led to my invention of Pixon, or pixel art object notation. And it doesn't have to just be about pixel art. It could just be anything with pixels, much like how JSON is used outside of JavaScript despite its name. I might not write satire anymore, but I always take a chance to troll the daddy of JSON. So Pixon is a proposed standard for the representation of pixel art using JSON and properties of the EXIF RDF schema. It provides means for both lightweight data interchange and the object-oriented creation of digital images, especially for pixel art. I use JSON because of how universal it is. Unlike past attempts at anti-compression formats like XBitmap, which are written in C, and its sequel, XPixmap, although this is like in the late 80s when the universe wasn't all that big, so universal interchange was a different kind of beast. Actually, the thought just crossed my mind that maybe this will make a comeback with WebAssembly, who knows. I fucking love this format, by the way, and it's sort of inspired my thinking around representing animated pixel art using Pixon, where you're defining the colors as a variable, and then each like string is just like the listing of the pixels by that color, which I think is pretty rad. But yeah, Pixon's just JSON. There are two objects, EXIF and PIXIF. EXIF is any set of properties defined by the exchangeable image format RDF schema, which specifies the formats used by digital devices like cameras and scanners to tag digital images. If you look at the info of your photo, it has the info of like what you took the photo with. And you know, when you think about the app and software combo that you make to draw pixel art, is itself a digital device. And for the sake of creating pixel art, many of the properties are not necessary or even applicable. I've narrowed it down to software, artist, image description, user comment, copyright, and date time. But you can like add as many things as you want. I know at JSConf, Ryan Dahl, like one of his regrets about Node was how much configuration is in packaged JSON. I just say like configure every fucking thing in packaged JSON. You can add as much as you want to Pixon. But because it's based on a schema that's existed since like 2003 and before that. PIXIF is the pixel art spin of EXIF. In essence, it's unique to pixel images, breaks down the image beyond its typical metadata, and focuses on the individual strokes and drawings of the pixels within the image. The first property, pixels, is an array of pixel objects representing the pixels drawn in the image. So you basically push to that array as a pixel is created, and you see those, you recognize those X, Y, and color coordinates. It can or cannot be immutable. I prefer immutable so that you're constantly just pushing pixels so you can see the whole process of drawing. You know, if you're a spy, you can like write a message and then erase it all and then draw over it. I love, like, spies seem cool. Because it's a new idea in this format, the list of properties is fluid and ever-changing at the moment. So right now it's just X, Y, and color, but it's a pretty young standard considering how little work I've been able to put into it since I started. I can see future canon properties in Pixif like frames for animated pixel art. And it would probably look something quite like X bitmap electric boogaloo. And pixel objects can also contain stroke IDs like they do in make8bitart.com if you view the source. I think Potch had contributed that years ago. I just figure that as the community of people developing with Pixon grows, then more properties can be standardized. And the whole purpose of proposing a standard is so that everyone can use it and build great apps on their own to collaboratively and build a community of cool folks excited about the open web and how it can be used to continue innovating digital art. And lucky for me, that's already been happening in the past few years, so I wanted to give you a look at some of the things that I've built and other people have built in the past couple of years that import and export Pixon. So pixonloop.glitch.me is the original Pixon playground I built during my residency at Made in NY. Used to live at august.today. And it has an initial Pixon file that draws that message, and you can export it. You can import Pixon and play around with it, and it just loops drawing it over and over again. Just want to show off that glitch apps have a console. You can see here that the Pixon file for that drawing is only 14 kilobits, and a PNG file would probably be about like 50K. And a GIF of high quality, because you want anti-compression, because pixel art, when it's compressed, looks like garbage. The littlest, if any, compression would be much higher. So if you have a photograph and you export it to Pixon, it's going to be a really large JSON file. You probably just want to use the photograph. But if you're concerned about keeping the process of creating abstract pixel art, Pixon is much more performant. Make8bitart implements the ability to import and export Pixon. It's not as good as I'd like it to be, but I'm planning to spend my open source time in Q4. That's director speak for the fourth quarter of the year. To focus on refactoring Make8bitart so it doesn't use jQuery. I want it to be more responsive, so it works as a PWA. I got to add like a manifest and all that fun stuff. And I want to enhance the Pixon experience cross-browser since there tends to be issues. Image to pixon.glitch.me converts your image to Pixon. I made it on the fly because there's this kid who is making a video game for his final project in college, and he had it saved, but then like his browser crashed and local storage for some reason cleared out. I implement local storage to save your artwork. And he was like, oh, I need to import this image so bad, and I don't have that as part of Make8bitart, so I gave him this app. I spun it up in an evening for him to import the Pixon version of his art, and he did really well on his final, which is really cool. So even though that's not really what the point of Pixon is, like, it's there, you can do it. People do weird stuff with all tech that we do. Anyway, Tara Vansel made Pixel Eyes, which is inspired by that previous app, and it lets you pixelize or pixelatize the image before converting to Pixon, which I think is pretty rad. Blake Winton made an Acorn extension, if any of you use the Acorn image editing app, that lets you export your images to Pixon. Just search Acorn Pixon, and you'll find the gist come up. Matthew Hudson made an NPM module. I haven't had a chance to use it yet. It's fairly new. He emailed me. He said, Pixon's available. Can I like name my module that? I was like, I'm not your mom. You can name it that, but I don't think it's like the right name for it. But he like did it anyway. Take me to church. And then this guy Andy made an SVG Pixon renderer, which is really rad. So it just takes Pixon and then converts it to SVG. So there are people who have made art, make 8-bit art, and they're like, I want to convert this to SVG. And I'm like, export the Pixon, run it through this renderer, and you've got your SVG. So I don't have to build that monolith image editing app. I can have these set of like apps that I list in the app for people to use. And I think you can just search SVG Pixon renderer on CodePen and have it going there. And basically, he just creates the SVG element and just adds a little pixels to it. So yeah, the future of Pixon is unknown. It needs work. I plan to improve its usage and make 8-bit art and build more apps on Glitch that you all can remix and create the apps of your dreams with. And if you're interested in getting involved, the spec can be read at jenmoney.biz/Pixon. Of course, I should probably get its own official site. Who knows? If you want to watch more of me talking about Pixon, pixel art, or computer graphics in general, I made such a prototype of pixel art processor animation in my TXJS talk about the array prototype before I had my residency. It had rave reviews. Much like, he also loved my Jortsort talk. I also then spoke at JSConf Columbia after my residency where I launched Pixon shortly after I released the first draft. Yeah, shout out to Columbia Dev. One of the best conferences ever. And I sort of deconstructed the pixel and talked about the things that I was working on. And back then, I was the only one that had been doing anything with Pixon. And as you can see in the past couple of years, more people have. The community's growing, which is great. I talk about some computer graphics theory, specifically how to use Bresenham's line algorithm to draw lines in pixel grids at Code Genius in some year. Yeah, that crowd, they think I look like Ellie Goulding. But yeah, that was a fun. That's one of my favorite talks, despite the comments. So yeah, in 2014, I authored an algorithm in Jest, and shortly after, I authored the original spec for Pixon. Not in jest. This isn't a joke. And I think that anyone can and should do that kind of stuff. And the great thing about tech is that much of its history has been documented, and we could take that and run with it, invent our own technologies, and help people make great things. And just like how there's always a new framework in our ecosystem that makes development easier for us, the evolution of all technology needs us to have room to explore and invent. Remember how those prestigious research institutions like JPL and Xerox PARC and Bell Labs, they needed help from artists and computer scientists who had a passion for art. And they needed them to drive innovation so we could see pixels on a screen today. And I feel like I could already see it happening already, that history is repeating itself. And we're going to need artists and web developers and computer scientists interested in art to drive how future pixels are shown. And I think it's imperative that more women need to be given a space and credit for that exploration. So I dedicate this talk to Joan Miller, who in 1969 in Bell Labs pioneered paint software by creating the first frame buffer that was 3-bit. You can't really find much info on Joan. And when they talk about the frame buffer, they're like, yeah, it's the first, but it was pretty slow. It was 1969. Everything was slow. So yeah, not surprisingly, Homegirl doesn't have a Wikipedia page, and hopefully that will change. Anyway, I hope you all enjoy the rest of this incredible conference. I think I earned this. If you have questions about Pixon or Glitch, please do email me or come up to me throughout the day. I really want to talk to you all and see what kind of cool stuff that you're making. And yeah, thank you very much.